The Rocket Man, Drew DeArmond from 97.7 ESPN Radio in the Rocket City of Huntsville, Alabama. Co-host weekday mornings of Talking Ball, 7 to 9 a.m. Joins me here on Tuesdays on the Gary Harris Show. Drew, you ready to go?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Gary?
Doing great. Good to have you. Let's start with football. We're going to get into some basketball discussion, too, here as we do a couple of segments. But Alabama football, of course, the focus is getting back to the SEC championship game, winning the SEC championship, and getting into the college football playoff after falling short in 2019. It's kind of become the norm here. I don't know if it's good or bad, but, coaching shuffles that seem to happen after every season. Nothing is expected to be announced, but it appears Freddie Roach, former Alabama linebacker, who had an offer from the New York Giants to coach the defensive line, stayed at Ole Miss after Lane Kiffin offered him the title of assistant head coach and recruiting coordinator. It does appear that he's going to be joining the staff here to coach the defensive line. It looks like Brian Baker, current defensive line coach, will move to an off-the-field position here at UA. What do you think of the move to bring in Freddie Roach as the defensive line coach?
Well, I mean, certainly it's all got everything to do with recruiting. I mean, arguably the best player left on the board for the 2020 class is in Lucedale, Mississippi, just down from Mobile, and that's McKinley Jackson, big defensive tackle. He was tremendous in the All-American game. Over in San Antonio, he's very quick. He's a guy that's been compared to Warren Sapp by Ed Ogeron, and he'll visit LSU this weekend. He's a former LSU commitment. Of course, this is coming at an interesting time for LSU as they don't have a defensive coordinator. We'll see if Bo Pelini is going to be in his second tenure there. There's been rumors that their defensive line coach is going to follow Dennis Johnson, is going to follow Dave Aranda to Baylor. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now with that LSU coaching staff. Certainly Ed Ogeron is probably going to, being a former defensive line coach, is going to take a very aggressive approach to recruitment, probably recruit him personally. But Alabama had him back on campus this weekend. And I know he likes Brian Baker and Pete Golding quite a bit. Brian Baker probably going to move into that associate athletic director for football role that Burton Burns vacated, going to the New York Giants. So we're all happy for Burton to get a chance to go to the highest level. Brian Baker likely slides into an off-field role, but he has recruited McKinley Jackson. But the one thing we've heard in the last 24 hours is McKinley has a very, very close relationship with Freddie Roach. It's the main reason that he had, I think, eliminated Ole Miss and decided not to visit there because Freddie was going to the Giants. They did a U-turn. They offered him some money to stay at Ole Miss and another title as associate head coach. Now it looks as though he's going to be in his third tenure with Nick Saban in Alabama. This would be the first one on field. But this has a lot to do with recruiting. And if Alabama could get McKinley Jackson to go with Tim Smith, I think they would be ecstatic with their D-line class and the back-to-back defensive line classes, because Tim Smith was, I think, maybe the most important guy that they held on to when they signed early, because there was some thought that he might be leaning to Florida. Sal Sunseri got that done. If Freddie Roach could come in here and get McKinley Jackson in the fold, I think it would be immense for Alabama, because you could play those two guys side by side. And, you got those two guys and then all this other young defensive line talent. There would be ample guys for Freddie Roach to develop. He's got two guys at the Senior Bowl this week in Benito Jones and Josiah Coatney. He's a good young coach. I know a lot of people were excited about Bo Davis potentially coming back, but I think Freddie Roach is no doubt a quality addition to this Alabama staff, and it looks like it's definitely going to happen.
Yeah, speaking of the defensive line that Roach will most likely be coaching next year, you mentioned you get Tim Smith coming in. If you get McKinley Jackson to go with him, that could be a dynamic duo for minimum of 3 years. But some of the players coming back, you lose Raekwon, who maybe at times didn't live up to his awesome physical potential, but was a really good player. You lose the two rush-ins on the outside with Lewis and Jennings. But there's some young talent up front. They got to play quite a bit. I mean, obviously, DJ Dale was progressing nicely until he got injured. Christian Barmore certainly flashed. Talk about the pieces on that defensive front for next season, and if you think that Alabama can get back to being what we've expected from them in the past, and that's kind of dominant up front on the defensive line.
Well, first of all, they need to get DJ Dale healthy and get that knee fixed going into the 2020 season. They need to get LeBron Ray healthy. I think it's kind of been underrated what he could have done last year. He was starting to play very well before he got re-injured against South Carolina in that first half. If you can get LeBron Ray back, he was a preseason All-SEC player last year. If you have LeBron Ray and DJ Dale to go along with a Christian Barmore, who, as you said, continued to develop and emerge, and then you have guys like Braylon Ingraham, who you saw very little of, but when you did, you saw some impressive things. Ismail Sobcher has the talent, no question about it. If he just is developed properly, I think he can be a player for Alabama. So they've got a lot of good young pieces. You got Byron Young and Justin Aboigbe. And Aboigbe wasn't really healthy last year either, Gary. He just recently had foot surgery, so hopefully he is going to be healthy by the time fall camp comes around. What Alabama has a chance to do is they have a chance with the proper coaching and development to have a two-deep defensive line with no drop-off. And when we saw that in 2016, Alabama had one of the best defensive lines in the country. They had one of the best defenses in the country, and if it hadn't been, I think, for two key injuries on that defense, to Eddie Jackson, who is now the highest-paid safety in all of football with the Chicago Bears, and Sean Deion Hamilton, an emerging linebacker for the Washington Redskins, then I think that team wins the national championship. Certainly no disrespect to Clemson, but I think those two defensive injuries played a very large role. And remember, Eddie Jackson was also leading the nation in punt returns that year, so that took that aspect away from Alabama also. But I think that defensive line group, it's still very young, a lot of talent there, and I think with the returnees, if I'm Freddie Roach, I'd be licking my chops because he helped recruit some of those guys when he was here before, as far as lay the foundation for it anyway. And so he's got a chance, to come in and coach some very talented guys. And if they can close the deal in recruiting in this cycle, then I think Alabama may not have the number one class, but they would have filled all their needs, and that would be huge. And I think defensively, if you get the right pieces in place on this coaching staff, Alabama can be elite again on that side of the ball.
Visiting with Drew DeArmond, talking football in this segment. We'll talk some hoops in the next segment. We'll take your phone calls as well at 205-342-9904 if you want to get involved in the conversation. Obviously, linebacker is going to be better. You get the two would-be starters from last year, Moses and McMillan back, and then Shane Lee and Christian Harris had to start basically the entire season. Feel good about that. In the back end, a lot of numbers. You do lose a corner in Diggs, and you lose a guy who I thought was the glue of that secondary in Xavier McKinney. How do you replace him, and who do you think steps in that role?
Well, I mean, it's going to be an interesting, spring to see what happens there as far as Xavier McKinney. I thought he was the best safety in the SEC, no doubt about it. I mean, I think DeMarco Helms is someone to watch. Very impressive physically. We'll see the kind of mental strides he makes, but he got a chance to play a little bit last year. Of course, he was a freshman from the Baltimore, Maryland area that I know the Alabama staff's was very high on. I think that as far as DB goes, I think there's going to be some young players that get a chance, like a Jordan Battle. He played quite a bit, really a lot, and I know Nick Saban was very high on him. I think his role will expand, but I think Battle and Helms will be the guys to watch. I thought, that toward the end of the season in the bowl game for that preparation for that game, Josh Jobe, he's not a safety, but I thought he made some strides starting for Trevon Diggs at corner because Michigan tried to pick on him. I thought he made some plays in that game. He didn't hang his head. He's another one that's going to get, a big-time opportunity, no doubt about it. And I think sometimes some players get forgotten because, you don't see them a lot, but the off season sometimes is a great chance for them to get to develop and it kind of, and some kids are under the radar, but that's probably a good thing. And the one kid that I'm really excited to see, how he develops is Eddie Smith. He's kind of been forgotten, but he'll be going into his junior season from Slidell, Louisiana. And I think, he's long and rangy. He's, of course, related to Devontae Smith. And I think he's a guy that could maybe come not out of nowhere, but maybe a guy, as I said, that was under the radar that people hadn't been counting on, that if he really continues to grind, that I think he could, earn a role on that defense also. And then another, defensive back that now we know is out of the transfer portal is Scooby Carter. He, had some maturity issues this year, Gary. He has a lot of ability. I know the coaching staff is very high on his talent. If he'll completely buy in to what they want to do with him and what they want to teach him, Scooby Carter could be that guy that, takes over that star position in the nickel spot, because it's never been about talent with Scooby. It's always kind of been his maturity level, but he's going to get another shot with this staff. And sometimes when you talk a guy out of the transfer portal, that's as big as signing a recruit. And I think Scooby has 5-star talent, so we're going to see kind of where that fits. But Eddie Smith, Scooby Carter, DeMarco Helms, Jordan Battle, those are the guys that I'll be watching closely in the spring.
On offense, obviously the quarterback position will be watched closely. Can Mac Jones hold off some other guys? But let's talk about the right tackle position with Jedrick Wills leaving early. Clearly, Scott Lashley didn't feel like he was going to factor in. He's transferred to Mississippi State. Evan Neal could potentially move over from guard, but there are some other possibilities as well. What do you see as far as Alabama filling that right tackle void?
Well, I see that I think they're going to move Evan Neal. I think he's a natural tackle. I think he's going to be given first shot there. We know Alex Leatherwood came back to continue to protect the blind side and be the left tackle. I thought he had some bright moments. I thought it was wise for him to come back, though. Still give him 2 years at his natural position at left tackle at the University of Alabama as a starter. I think Evan Neal has all the ability in the world to be a dominant tackle, and then it opens the door for competition. We know Landon Dickerson will be one of those 5, whether it's at center or left guard. But we also saw, enough of some young players like a Darian Dalcourt. I know the coaching staff is very high on him. Is he going to be ready to go, at the center spot? If he's ready to go, then I think that's going to open some doors, for that offensive line. And I know Mike Loxley, who recruited him, was very high on him, thought he was a better player than Clay Webb, who got a lot of publicity as a 5-star guy, but he thought Darian Dalcourt was the best center that he had, evaluated. And then, it also, and you also get a chance to see a guy like Amari Kite. Can he push Evan Neal, or is he going to be now that Scott Lashley has departed from Mississippi State? Amari Kite, who redshirted, he's probably going to start being groomed, because I've heard that he had impressed during the points of this season. He could be the next left tackle for the University of Alabama, so he has a chance to move up that depth chart, no doubt about it. And I also am excited about Pierce Quick. I mean, Pierce Quick is a guy that redshirted. He's versatile. He can play inside or out. And then don't forget about Emil Ekiyor. If Darian Dalcourt's not ready to go at center, Emil Ekiyor, to me, is a swing guy. He can play center or both guard positions. He could be the guy maybe that steps in at that left guard spot if Landon Dickerson stays at center. But I think this offensive line, I understand you lose a first-round draft choice, and I think that's where Jedrick Wills will end up going. Very athletic right tackle, Gary. But I think with the development of some of these other young linemen, and with Evan Neal moving to his natural spot, and with Darian Dalcourt, if he's the real deal, I think this offensive line has a chance to be better than last year. And if Kyle Flood stays, that's some continuity there. And we heard some buzz that he might be departing, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. That would be big for Alabama to have the continuity on the offensive side of the ball, and to have Kyle Flood, who I thought did a nice job back coaching that offensive line.
Before we get to the break, Drew, of course, running back is set now as far as the starter. Najee Harris is returning. My question is, what about the number 2 running back? Brian Robinson, we really thought he would have a breakout year in 2019. It really didn't happen. He struggled at times, to me. You got Trey Sanders coming back from injury. You got Keelan Robinson. You got some talented freshmen coming in. Who will be the number 2 running back, do you think?
Competition, man. I mean, my gut would tell me Trey Sanders, because he was really flashing before he injured his foot. But he's a talented guy. Brian Robinson is someone I know the coaching staff does not want to lose. I mean, he could still potentially graduate transfer, but I know they're going to try to develop a role for him. He looked better, Gary. It was strange in the scrimmages last year than in the actual games. I still think he's a talented guy. For whatever reason, he just didn't have a great redshirt junior year, but he has a year of eligibility left, so he's certainly someone the coaching staff trusts. He can play a lot of different positions. He could be an H-back. He could be a fullback, a running back. So he's a really good receiver out of the backfield. So I'm going to be interested to see if he ends up kind of being a Swiss Army knife like a Roy Upchurch developed into for Nick Saban. And then you got Keelan Robinson. He may have more explosive speed than anyone on the team. He showcased that last year. With the losses at wide receiver, I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe got to look at the slot and also maybe replaced Henry Ruggs on kickoff return to kind of develop a role for him. But I think it's going to come down to Trey Sanders, Brian Robinson and Keelan Robinson. I know you've got three freshmen coming in, and Jason McClellan, Kyle Edwards, and Roydell Williams, but they're going to have to jump over some really good players to become a factor. So if they do, you know how special they are. But I think it's going to come down to those three guys competing. And another interesting factoid for you, Gary, just as I'm coming on your show, we've had another departure from Alabama's coaching staff. Certainly, it was a graduate assistant as he was a GA last year for Alabama's defensive staff. But very interesting that we have the Belichick-Saban connection again, as Benny Sunseri has now taken a job in a support staff role off the field for the New England Patriots.
Oh, wow. Oh, the breaking news right there from Drew. Vinny Sunseri, great player at Alabama, been on the staff, joining the New England Patriots. And, he's going to flourish as a coach, Drew. I think you and I both know that. Thanks for that update. Vinny Sunseri off to join the New England Patriots staff. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We're going to talk some hoops. This Alabama Nate Oates basketball-led team is starting to make some waves, starting to come together. We'll discuss that with Drew DeArmond, the co-host of Talking Ball from 97.7 ESPN Radio in Huntsville. That's coming up next. Little ball with the Rocket Man out of Huntsville, Alabama, and Drew just passing along some info, first reported by Matt Zenitz from AL.com, that Vinny Sunseri is going to be joining the New England Patriots in a support staff role. Good for Vinny. He's got a bright future ahead of him. Don't be surprised if he's back here on the staff in Tuscaloosa again in the future. Of course, his dad, Sal, and brother Tino at Alabama. All right, Drew, let's talk some basketball. This Alabama basketball team, you can't undo what's been done, man. You'd love to have that game back against Penn, the one back against Penn State, obviously the game back against Florida, and this would be an entirely different season. But they are playing very, very well, and head to Vanderbilt tomorrow night, coming off back-to-back SEC wins over Auburn and over Missouri, 19 points and 14 points. What are you seeing from this Alabama basketball team that gives you hope that this team could still play itself into the NCAA tournament?
Well, just growth, Gary, and improvement. John Petty has become an all-SEC guard, one of the best players in the league, which is what I always envisioned when he was playing for Jack Doss, both at Johnson and Mae Jemison high schools. He was a two-time Mr. Basketball, one of the best players I've ever had an opportunity to cover here in Huntsville. And then Kyra Lewis, there's still some growing pains there, but he has such great tools, and this system fits him so well. And then the growth of Alex Reese, his performance in the first half against Mizzou when Alabama was trying to get rolling offensively. The 15 points he scored was huge. You can tell he's gaining so much confidence, Gary. He's now making plays off the dribble. He's just a perfect fit for this system. And then Herbert Jones. I mean, and his injury early really hurt Alabama. They lost the Penn game because of that. I don't think he was completely right when they played Penn State. And what I mean by that is because now you're seeing him being able to manufacture and score. Just the other night, 7 of 8 from the free throw line. Who would have thought Herbert Jones would be doing that? This coaching staff has done an amazing job of developing these guys and earning their trust. And you love watching Jaden Shackelford because he doesn't look like he's scoring a lot. I mean, you look down and he's got 17, Gary. So I just think this has become a very good offensive team. This has become a team that if they shoot the three well, they're going to score 90-plus points. But even if they don't make a lot of threes, as long as they don't forget their identity and they continue to shoot them, and, of course, you have to account for that, They've shown the ability to still be able to manufacture points defensively by, forcing turnovers, getting out in transition, and hitting free throws. And I just think when you're not shooting well and you score 83 points against Auburn, an undefeated Auburn team, that's significant. And then they drop 88 on Mizzou. And Missouri's 31 of 31, Gary, from the free throw line, which is an SEC record. And nearly the national record was Oklahoma State, I think, a few years ago, went 34 of 34. You nearly set that kind of record, and yet you lose by 14. That shows how well your team is playing, on both sides of the ball, both into the court. And I think this Alabama team's improving a lot defensively with Herbert Jones' health, and I think they're gaining confidence each and every game offensively. And quite frankly, I think they may be the most dangerous team in the SEC right now. Certainly when you heard John Calipari talking about Alabama, he didn't look forward to playing them again this season at all. And I just think Nate Oates is doing a great job, and the last two crowds will let you know how excited this fan base is getting.
Yeah, it's just such a fun team to watch play. And I've been going back and forth on this for the last few years. Winning cures all, but I'm going to tell you this, Drew. I do believe this in this day and age, with attention spans being what they are. You want to win, but fans also want to be entertained. And I do think in basketball, it's if you lose, 88 to 84, you don't want to lose. But if you do, it's a lot more fun than losing 54 to 50. And this team makes it fun, win or lose. And my biggest takeaway, Drew, every time I watch them play, is just how hard they play from the opening tip to the 40th minute of the basketball game. It's constant effort, an incredibly conditioned basketball team, the kind of team that you can be proud of as a fan, whether they win the game or not. That's my takeaway. You agree with that?
Playing very hard. And then I'm a big body language guy, Gary. There's no bad body language on the bench. Everyone is up. Everyone is excited about playing. You've got guys like Britton Johnson, who's a walk-on from Mountain Brook, who I watched him throughout his tenure with Bucky McMillan. He probably took more charges than any kid I've ever seen. When you have walk-ons, and this is a kid that doesn't get to play much, Gary, when he's tweeting last week about something special going on within this program, and he's been a part of championships on the high school level, then there's something special brewing in Tuscaloosa. And like I tweeted out after the Alabama-Auburn game, I think it's going to be a fun time to be a basketball fan in this state. Got two really good programs, two really good coaches. These fan bases are both going to be energized. There's going to be a huge crowd when they come to Auburn on February the 12th. It'll be a very difficult environment. Auburn has a great home court advantage. But I got to tell you, you need to get behind Natos, get behind this program. I still think they can get into the NCAA tournament very much. So they're right now, I think one projection today had them one of the last two teams out. So they're right back in the conversation. This is a huge opportunity at Vanderbilt coming up on Wednesday, and then at home against K-State. The schedule is setting up for them to potentially go on a nice run here and get some wins. And so it's an exciting time, and I think the state's always going to be known for football, Gary. It's always going to drive the bus. But basketball is about to be a close second. And you and I have talked about this. I think this Alabama fan base is hungry to support a winning basketball program, and I think Nate Oates is going to get plenty of support going forward as the basketball coach in Tuscaloosa.
I do, too. We got about 30 seconds, Drew. On the national scene, is this as wide open as you've seen college basketball in a long time?
No doubt. 7 different number one teams. Scott, Drew, and Baylor right now, number one. It's completely wide open. I mean, you can see a lot of different teams making a run at the Final Four depending on how hot you get at the right time and what kind of draw you get. March Madness is going to be fun this year, Gary. There's not really a dominant team in college basketball due to all of the early departures to the NBA, and so it's going to be fun, and it's been interesting to watch. And the SEC, I don't know, I'm not sure it's quite as good as it's been the last couple of years, but I still think it's a 5 to 6 bid league. And I think the SEC tournament, especially when you start talking about the top 6, 7, 8 teams, is going to be fun to watch.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for the first hour. Give Drew a follow on Twitter at DrewD977ESPN. Of course, listen for him on Talking Ball weekday mornings from 7 to 9 a.m. on 97.7 ESPN Radio in Huntsville, and, of course, with me every Tuesday. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you, Gary.